Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Data Standard Audio Experience. Today on our show, we have Graham McDonald, the Chief Data Officer at Urban Institute. And today we're speaking about nonprofit research organizations. So welcome to the show, Graham. It's so great to have you on the show, and we're going to learn more about nonprofits today.
Thanks, Catherine. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah. Could you tell us more just about your background and go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. So, as you said, Graham McDonald, I lead our data and technology operations around data here at the Urban Institute. I have a background as a housing researcher, originally started here at Urban, worked to start our sort of data viz capacity through experimenting and doing my own hacky JavaScript and doing a little bit of like web scraping here and there, somewhere around 10 years ago now. And then went off to grad school to be a policy person, some master's in public policy at UC Berkeley, where I also studied some technology things and some policy issues, and then came back to Urban and sort of pitched this idea of let's build a data science and now data engineering team. And I've, in the last 5 years, been building up that team here, establishing it as now a team of about 8, soon to be 9 people. And so we basically work across Urban to supply the Institute with technology from data science and big data work to data engineering and everything in between.
Yeah, that's awesome. And could you tell us a bit more about this nonprofit that you work at Urban Institute, and just tell us more about the overall mission and any cool projects that you've been working on?
Yeah, they're all cool. No, the nonprofit in Urban, right? So Urban Institute is, we're about depending on the day, somewhere around 500 to 600 person nonprofit research organization here in Washington, D.C. Our motto is called Elevate the Debate, right? So the idea is to provide people, predominantly policymakers, but we call them change makers. So they could be people in the corporate sector driving for change. They could be people in government, whether that's an elected official or somebody at an agency just trying to make a rule happen or provide a government service to somebody, or it could be a community member who is agitating for change in their neighborhood or organizing, or in an advocacy group who's doing the same, to use evidence to drive those decisions. Right. So the goal is to help all of those actors to actually use evidence to drive decisions and put the evidence in their hands so that they can make better decisions and use that to inform what they're going to do. So Urban as a whole is this organization that works across all these different actors, and we have about 12 different domain expertise areas where our researchers work. So that could be education or housing or jobs or, even niche things like housing finance, very important industry, and taxes, right? And everything in between. So we basically cover all of those topics and work across those areas to help governments in areas, like COVID-19 that have been really cross-disciplinary and have affected a number of those different areas, and trying to basically use the evidence that our researchers provide, but also where my team comes in to use technology to help them to better do their research. So whether that's to use big data instead of their traditional laptops for doing their analysis, whether that's automating specific processes, whether that's producing things like decision assist tools that are used that researchers' expertise, it sort of bakes that into the tool making process. We sort of help in many different ways to help the researchers, but also to help bake that expertise into the products that we produce.
Yeah, so super cool stuff that you're working on with your team right now. And so how does using data and technology help support equity analysis for democratizing these analytics that you're working on?
Yeah, and so that's a really good question. And I know that we talked a little bit about this before. And the equity analysis and democratizing data is something that we've seen a big increase in demand for recently. Urban has always been someone who's been doing equity analyses, doing data work that is focused on equity. And I said our mission's elevate the debate. Our specific focus is usually on lower income Americans and people who are more disadvantaged. And so our research focus is on elevating the debate for many of those types of policy questions. And so equity's always been a core motivating principle for our work. And the important thing about that is that now, recently in the last few years, cities and states have been driving that change in terms of demanding and equity at the advocacy level, and then for city leadership, they've been saying, well, we want to make equity promises. So they've been saying all of our policies should improve the lives of everyone, and not only that, but those who are most disadvantaged should benefit the most in some cases. And so they're coming at this with an equity promise, and they have these questions that they need to ask in some cases that are called assessments, where they go at it and say, hey, I want to make sure I include this community in the process, right? I should make sure that I'm considering it from this perspective, and I'm going to ask that question. Or I'm going to establish a board that, has some community members and some technology people, and we try to make some mix of that happen so that we can make better decisions. That's one part of the process, but where we come in at Urban is we try to provide, again, that evidence to that debate. So it's one thing to bring people in and then we all disagree. And so then where is the point where we say, all right, actually what the evidence says is your plan is putting the majority of the resources in the higher income communities, right? We want to be able to say definitive things like that with the data, right? And so we find it really important to put that quantitative mindset behind it so that people can say, yes, this is a more equitable policy than this other one that you're considering, or this rule, for example, in last year in COVID, a few things that were really in high demand that we've been responding to have been on, Wi-Fi hotspots, COVID vaccination and testing sites, childcare center availability, as the government has sort of stepped in to fill a lot of those voids. And, one part of those plans has been to consult our spatial equity tool. And this tool essentially allows people to upload a spatial data set, and we tell you whether it's more or less likely to be located in certain types of neighborhoods. So is it more likely to be located in Black or African-American neighborhoods? Is it less likely to be located in areas where we see that people have low internet connectivity, right? Or is it more likely to be located where people have families with kids, right? And so those are obvious considerations that you'd want in any policy, right? But surprisingly, there's just not a lot of analytic capacity within government to do this kind of quick turnaround work, especially when we're trying to respond to things like COVID. And so, we found this to be a really useful way to sort of leverage our expertise on doing all that complex spatial joining and analyses with the, American Community Survey data, with their data sets, using cloud technology to sort of automate all of that. So someone just uploads a data set, all this magic occurs in a few seconds in the back end, and we produce these graphs that say, hey, look, your Wi-Fi hotspots are actually not in the areas that you need them to be in. Here's the areas of need, and here's your areas, and here's the graph of where they're over and underrepresented among those different demographic groups, like, people with lower high internet connectivity, or, for example, on the, COVID vaccination sites, it's like, here's my first plan. I'm going to look at your tool and I'm going to say, oh, whoops, it looks like we missed these key neighborhoods. I had a sense because I know the city that these areas are the right ones, but I just didn't have that full data picture, so I didn't understand where to put them. So, this has been a really helpful tool. And I think this type of work, where in the past it was something a consultant would do, right? And we only have enough capacity to do for a few people as a nonprofit. Now we can sort of use technology to leverage that capacity across tons of people have been using this tool, but also other tools from us and other organizations during the pandemic that have enabled people to like us to expand our impact as a nonprofit, right? We're not the big consulting firms of the world. We can't work with everyone. So this enables us to sort of help as many people as we can.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of the work that you had just mentioned, there's a lot of different moving parts as to kind of looking at the different features of different neighborhoods for you to kind of go deeper into your analysis. So it's super interesting work you're doing. And you and I had talked offline a bit, and you had mentioned that it's very beneficial to hire people who are non-technical into these more technical positions and roles. And so could you just tell us more about this, and why is this so in specifically a nonprofit setting?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And, it's something I feel strongly about. You probably saw me waving my hands. People who have the technical capacity represent, I would say, when we have a job opening, the majority of the applicants to that job opening, but they don't necessarily have the policy experience. And we pretty much immediately take them out of the pool for our running. And I have no doubt those people are going to be super successful folks in industry. So it's not because they're not talented. It's because there's for a couple of reasons. One, we want people that are going to stick around and learn policy domains or have learned policy domains, because we find that, if you're coming in with a hammer, right, and everything's a nail, you're going to come in with that pre-baked bias of like, this is the solution I'm bringing. And we see that as often as a problem that I see it personally in the tech industry of, we have these really cool new tools, let's solve a problem, right? And where we want people to come in is like, I really understand the problem. It involves human beings. And let me tell you, human beings, even though technology is really complex and it's hard for me to explain technology to my mother, right? Or my father or anybody, human beings are even more complex, right? We don't make sense sometimes. We make contradictory decisions. When we interact with each other, we'll make different decisions based on who we're interacting with, right? Whereas machines have some sort of predictable complexity to them. And so, one part, it's actually harder almost to teach people the policy and people angle of that understanding than it is to teach them the technology sense, even though both are difficult. And so what we do is we approach, knowing that we're probably not going to get the top engineers in the world, but we're going to get really great people. We're going to approach it from, let's have somebody who has demonstrated policy experience or expertise. Whether that's, if you're starting entry level, it's, maybe you have a political science background or a policy background or a minor in college, like or you volunteered or interned for organizations that are interested in that sort of thing. And, you're programming in an open source language, you have the ability to learn quickly, you've shown an aptitude or you've had some experience with some of these new tools. And we can teach you the rest, right? We can sort of give you those skills and the technologies to get you up to speed, because what's important is that you're really invested in this policy area and you understand that it's complicated and you understand that there are certain solutions that have been tried and that maybe some of them are some simple ones actually, and that you're more open to those simple opportunities when you are not so invested in having that expertise be like, I am an ML person, or I am this advanced big data person that needs to do the trillions of rows. Sometimes automating, as we're talking about the spatial equity tool, thousands of rows is really valuable for people, right? Even if it's a simple operation. And so, it's both important from a retention standpoint, but also it helps us to find the right solutions and focus on that impact rather than on the tool itself.
Yeah, and I think that's such an interesting point for you to bring up for specifically a nonprofit situation to kind of see when they're hiring people. It's really important to think about the people side, and technology is really just a tool to kind of help figure out all this analysis. So super interesting way to hire people, and I think that's great. And what are some ways you feel fulfilled specifically working at this nonprofit?
Yeah, I mean, working at a nonprofit, right? You're you try to get the money, but you're really there for the impact. So I think I would say I'm the same. At Urban, we have two big goals, as most nonprofits do, right? We want to make impact, and we want to fundraise enough so that we can stay alive for the next day, right? And so being able to do those two things is obviously super important. They're what consumes most of my day to day. But the impact is probably the part that I love the most. And, one of the things that's really well known in the data space and in the tech space is, do you have KPIs and do you have indicators? And of course we have some of those. But my favorite one is sort of this qualitative tracking that we do. So we basically have defined impact. People say that they're using our stuff. We see they're using it in the real world. They're using it to make a difference. Right. And this is sort of like where you get that warm and fuzzy feeling at the end of the day that I did a good job. And for us and my team, we basically track this. We have like sort of 3 levels. Someone said like a really nice thing about it, which is like sort of the lowest level of like, this is really cool, right? Because then you're obviously going to tell other people it's really cool, and that could help to get it to the right person who can make a difference in their community. There's the, I use this in my analysis, or I told someone to use this in their analysis, whether it be a government or it be an internal person at Urban or it be another research organization, right? And then there's sort of the highest level, which is like, I actually use this and we're advocating for this change and it happened. Or, I'm in the city government and we're actually going to use this for our legislative analysis. We've had states and cities come to us and say, we're using this for X. We're using this because we're trying to improve our pedestrian and bike safety in Minneapolis. We're using this because we're better locating our childcare centers in Marin County, California, because we're trying to make sure that they reach everybody. We're doing this because we want our COVID vaccine centers to be in neighborhoods that need it most, right? We're using this because we want our Wi-Fi hotspots be serving the kids at school. So we don't have these news stories, watching people sit outside in cold weather trying to access their school, right? And like love, like that is what gets you going at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, when times are tough. So we look at those at the end of the year, and every year since we've started this team, that list has grown and grown. And it's always great to just not only see it and share it with the team, but share it with everyone who has even ever interacted with you as part of that project, and then they get that nice feeling as well. So that's fun.
Yeah, definitely. And seeing the end result of everything that you've put together in the nonprofit setting, just seeing the amount of impact that you're making on the community, it's so great to see, I'm sure. And it's very clear that you're very passionate about this. And how did you kind of know that nonprofit was where you wanted to be in?
I think that's a really good question, because I don't think I set out saying like I want to make a career in the nonprofit world. I think, and this is what I recommend when I talk to a bunch of people in the data space, and I mentor people within and outside of Urban, and I basically say, look, you're never really going to want to know what you are going to do when you grow up, right? We all say like at every age, if you ask someone, there was always someone that'll say, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up, right? And it's like, well, you're 50, so shouldn't you know what you want to do when you grow up? But it's not the way it works. It's more of like this sort of things change, your life changes, the way you work changes, the way what you enjoy changes, and you sort of the way I think about it is you make hypotheses as you go along and you test them out with your career, and you're constantly learning and constantly growing. And so, when I first set out, I was like, well, what I want to do is do good in the world, which aligns a lot with what nonprofits do, but there's also corporate sector and government sector work that'll accomplish that. There's good work, at big consulting agencies, at universities. I basically started out trying to teach, realized I really liked the sort of like seeing the direct impact, but for me, I was too much in the data world to like give that up completely. And then came back and tried out doing my own little business around Excel. I loved that, but it was a little bit too much hustle for me. So I came into this middle space where it was like supported by a decent sized organization, still had enough time to be entrepreneurial and do my sort of hustle thing and get to do the data thing on the side and have some real world impact, and tried to find that balance. I've worked for or interned for nonprofit agencies, for government, and I just found that the balance wasn't quite right. So I keep trying things out and making sure that like I'm in about the right space. And that's how I know, I think like, I'm in the nonprofit world, doing the right thing, doing something that I really enjoy. But, I've changed, I've moved up in this organization and sort of changed roles from doing that research to doing that visualization to doing this now data science, and now a lot more engineering side work. So I always continue to experiment and explore, and definitely encourage others to do the same.
Yeah, no, that's great advice for our audience as well. Thank you so much, Graham, for joining us today. We at the Data Standard, we're trying to build a community where everyone can just come together, network, and collaborate. And so is there anything that the community can help do for you?
Definitely. We always love interacting with the data community, and I've learned a ton from everyone in the data community. I'm always looking for more advice on how to better run a data science and data engineering team. So would love to hear more on that. We are, as I said, growing as a team. So, urban.org/careers, we are hiring right now for 2 data science and 1 data engineering position. And we've actually only had 1 person leave the team in the last 5 years. So it really is growth. We're just growing. So we love to hear, see more people apply and to see great people in that space. And then, we'd love to see how folks in the data community pick up and use our tools and improve them and make them better. We make a lot of them available on GitHub, make our data sets available on our data catalog. If you use stuff like that, let us know. We'd love to hear it. And if you have improvements, we want to hear some feedback from folks in the field. And then obviously the last part is that we do partner all the time with folks both in the corporate space and the government space and everywhere in between, community groups that are doing change in their local community, and that's invaluable feedback and invaluable partnership for understanding their context, or how to make change happen often occurs across sectors, right? And so we are always looking for those partnerships. And if anything I said sounds interesting or might sound interesting, or you have ideas, please feel free to reach out to me, because we are definitely open to those sorts of partnerships, and know that we don't have all the skills and we don't have all the answers. And, often we find that there's complementary ways for our team to learn, or to gain new skills, or to gain temporary capacity for stuff that needs to get done. So.
Yeah, awesome. And where can everyone find you online to connect with you?
Sure. I am most active on Twitter. I'm at Graham iMac, so GRAHAMIMAC on Twitter. I don't really check my LinkedIn as often. I've heard people are doing that more these days, so I probably should. So you can probably find me on LinkedIn just using, Graham McDonald at the Urban Institute. Folks, feel free, especially on collaborations or questions, you can reach me at gmacdonald@urban.org. That's GMACDONALD at urban.org. And then I would highly encourage everyone in the data community also to check out our blog, which I was way more popular than I ever thought it would be. We started it 4 years ago. It's called Data at Urban, and we're on Medium. We go behind the scenes on the stuff that we do. So if you're ever interested in like how we built a certain technology, or how we built this data tool I just talked about, or how we make data viz decisions, or how you build equity into data viz and data technology, we're talking about that all the time in our own little niche corner. So come visit us and talk with us. We'd love to hear your feedback.
Yeah, awesome. And to our audience, for more information on the data standard, you can find us at www.datastandard.io, as well as on our LinkedIn and YouTube channel. And thank you so much, Graham, for joining us. It was so great to just hear more about your story and more about the things that you're working on. So thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you, Catherine. I appreciate it.